Hello, welcome to episode 14 of Defense Against the Dark Arts. I'm Paul Miil, and this episode is called Close Enough Encounters of the Fifth Kind. So, before we start, I was talking on the last video about Egypt. I don't want to give the impression that just because every day there was somebody who was sort of grifting me on the street doesn't mean that everybody in Egypt are grifters. Now, I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm just trying to be as accurate as I can. I talked with tons of people every day, and the vast majority of the people that I encountered, I believe, were sincere in being welcoming and friendly and just nice people. I mean, as nice or nicer than anybody you'd come across, probably nicer than people you'd come across in the street in Toronto, because Toronto's a pretty caustic at times in different areas. And, you know, I didn't know what neighborhoods were good and what neighborhoods weren't good in Cairo. So, you know, who knows what, they looked pretty sketchy, but, you know, I just want to clear that before we carry on, that the majority of the people I came across. Yeah, the majority of the people I came across. The majority of the people I came across were very friendly, welcoming, nice people, the citizens of Cairo. But there was a lot of scammers. I mean, more so than I've come across in any other city. So even though the general population seemed to be more friendly, there was an insidious sort of number of people creeping around the streets. And I think maybe that's why it was easier to get duped, because there were so many people. It was hard to keep your guard up. So many friendly, nice people. It's hard to keep your guard up. It's hard to think that, well, you know, you talk to that person, they seem nice. Well, okay, they're not trying to rip me off, you know, whatever, have a nice day kind of thing, right? You have these sort of, short, brief encounters with people. And so when you come, you have these many short, brief encounters with people, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is a scammer. This guy's scamming me or trying to scam me. And some of them are pretty spooky. There was, I don't know if I should go into a couple incidents. Yeah, maybe. The one, we were at the pyramids of Giza, and you're not allowed. It's illegal to climb on the pyramids. And there was police stationed like every 100 feet along the base of the pyramid, right? So, all right, nowhere near me. Okay, so what was I talking about? So at the pyramids, the police were stationed about every maybe 100 feet along the base of one of the pyramids. And so we were standing there, my wife and I, and we were, taking pictures of each other in front of the pyramid. And these two cops came up to us and said, hey, would you like to, go on the pyramid? We'll take pictures of you on the pyramid. And I'm like, are you sure? Because you're not supposed to. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. No problem. We're police. It's good. Go ahead. Give us your camera. So I'm like, all right. So I gave him the camera, and he said, go up, go higher, climb higher, go up. So we climbed up, a few more blocks, and it was kind of cool to have your picture taken on the pyramids, right? So chick, these guys took, I don't know, the camera was on automatic, so I don't know how these guys managed to take so many blurry photos, but they must have been moving and shaking the camera when they were taking the pictures. I don't know. Anyways, so we climbed back down, and then the guy's like, okay, now backsheesh. You got to give me some money. And so the implication was now, I think, that he was going to charge me for going on the pyramids if I didn't pay him. So, police, here you go, right? Who are you going to call? So I reached in my pocket, and I just had, maybe the equivalent of a couple dollars. So I just gave it to him. I figured, well, it's just backsheesh. Is all he's getting, right? I'm gonna walk away kind of thing. And these two guys were like, no. You. There might have been three of them. For sure, two at least. Anyways, they're like, no, you got to give us more. So I literally reached in my pants and pulled my pockets inside out, and I held my hands out like Jesus. And I'm like, I don't have any more money, buddy. I'm not going to give you any more. I didn't bring any more to the stinking pyramids, right? And so there was another cop stationed maybe another 100 feet up, and he saw what was going on. So he started blowing his whistle and yelling at these other cops. So they scrammed. They beat it. So I'm thinking, what were these guys going to do if that other cop, who happened to be a decent guy, wasn't, blowing the whistle? Because it was obvious to him. My pockets are turned inside out, my hands are out, and I'm shaking my head and shrugging my shoulders. So obviously he knew. And I'm sure I wasn't the first person these guys did this to. So anyways, So that's the police. I mean, if this is how the police are acting, you can imagine, some other people. Anyways, and there was another very insidious, scary situation. Actually, we were walking, and this guy was trying to get us to go to this friendly market, he called it. We were trying to go to the Cairo Tower, and he's like, no, that's closed to you. That's closed to foreigners. That's only open today it's a special holiday. It's only open for Egyptians today. It's not open for you. But there's a market. There's great deals today because of this, this holiday we're having today. And it's called the Friendly Market. Come on, it's just over here, right? And I'm like, no, man, thanks. See you later, buddy, right? So we walk to the tower anyways, right? And we go up and we look. And so we asked the locals that worked there, what's this friendly market? And they're like, what? We've never heard of no friendly market. And I said, yeah, it's supposed to be a few blocks up over there. And they're like, there's nothing over there, dude. So we went up the tower and we looked, but there's nothing there. Like, so there was just alleys. So I don't know where this guy would have led us if we would have allowed him to. We probably would have been, hogtied and sent to some who knows where. I don't know. Anyways, or maybe just mugged. Who knows? But so but that one was pretty obvious. And then there were guys who'd show up and say, "Hey, where you from? America?" And no, Canada. Oh wow, yeah. And then they pull out ID. Yeah, my girlfriend's in Canada. Oh yeah, here's her Canadian Tire card, and here's we got a bunch more Canadian ID. And I'm thinking, holy shit, motherfuckers. Your girlfriend's not going to give you her Canadian Tire card. Obviously, you mugged some Canadians, stole their wallets, and now you're flashing their ID to us to try to lower my defenses because you're friendly to Canadians. You're dating a Canadian. I could give a fuck if you're actually Canadian, motherfucker. Get the fuck away from me, So there's that kind of shit too, right? So, I mean, those guys are pretty obvious, but then there's the, the more subtle, insidious ones. When you go to the market, you're expecting people, and that's just more of a game, right? They're having fun. They're like, hey, trying to sell you stuff. And, you can't take it too seriously. It's more, they're not really scamming you. They're just trying to sell you shit for as much as they can get, right? It's not quite the same as what these other people were doing. Anyways, that's enough of my Egypt correction. So today we're going to be talking about perception, I guess. Perception is and how you perceive things. Sort of just a reflection on some of the things we talked about earlier in other, maybe that's what I should call this podcast episode, reflections on previous podcasts. So perception is paramount. How you look at things changes everything, and it's not colors or sounds of how you see things, but it's the entirety of how you perceive reality. It's not emotion. It is sort of coloring, but not colors. It's a framework of objective reality, and it's what the fuck am I talking about here? Okay, so yeah, there are different ways. There are different ways we subjectively perceive reality, and I mean, there are not intrinsically, how an individual perceives is not intrinsically less accurate than any other way, because there is no other way to perceive things than subjectively. There is objective truth and objective reality that we all share, but there is no way to view things objectively. We try to view things objectively, but no matter what we do, we're still experiencing things subjectively from our perspective, right? So no subjective viewpoint is intrinsically, like it's not automatically less accurate just because it's from a different viewpoint. If view A sees, a tower, the what do you call that thing in Paris? The Eiffel Tower. If you're looking at the Eiffel Tower from one perspective, right, it's not less accurate to go and look at it from a different perspective. They're just two perspectives. The objective truth is that there's the tower there, but the subjective view from one way and the subjective view from the other way, right? So perceiving something isn't quite the same as your perspective. I know it sounds like it is, but it's not. Like if you have two different people going back to, say, the Eiffel Tower, you have two different people looking at the Eiffel Tower, one from the north side and one from the west side. And so they have two different perspectives of that tower. But how they perceive that tower, you could have two people standing shoulder to shoulder, and they will perceive it differently depending on their mood and their schemata, how they perceive things, right? So perception isn't just perspective. It isn't just from your vantage point, your physical vantage point in space. It's that's not the only thing that affects it. It's your mental, your mood, right? How your mind perceives things. That is radically different from your, even though they're both called perspectives, my subjective perspective. Yeah, okay. That is different. And that's the thing. So we just need to recognize that every person, no matter what they do, views things subjectively. And even the same person who looks at the same thing in a different mood will see it differently. It's like when you watch a movie, depending on what mood you're in, right? You might enjoy a movie at one stage in your life, and then at another point, you might look at that movie and say, this movie's horrible. How did I ever like this, right? Different. It's the same movie. The movie hasn't changed. You've changed. So perspectives aren't really just from, like I'm talking about the mental perspectives. There's probably a term for this. I have no idea what it is, but so we all have subjective perspectives, and all our subjective perspectives have flaws. We all have, flaws of reasoning and bias that adds garbage and junk data to our data flow, our perception of objective reality. How we see things are colored by our moods, and this coloring is adding junk data depending on your mood. As per the what was that one type of priming? When you prime somebody with good deeds, the good deed priming. I can't remember what it's called, but when you give somebody something, and then they'll actually become temporarily blind to negative things, negative motivations, and they will be more apt to see positive ones. Well, see, you're perceiving things differently based on your mood, and that's being manipulated by somebody else. So we need to realize that we perceive things differently based on these things. We don't view things the same, even though it feels like you're the same, you're seeing everything the same, but we're not. So does our perception control our mood, or does our mood control how we perceive things? Well, we ultimately control our mood. We could steer it to different directions, or we can allow it to wallow in whatever. That's you steering it into the wallowing. It's our steering to whatever. We are ultimately in control of the direction that our mood's going. And our mood controls how we perceive things. And our perceptions feed back to affect and steer our mood. So it's all like interconnected, right? But we can always we could sort of steer it back a different direction. So if you start getting if you're some, pissy, shitty mood, that's on you, right? Things happen to everybody all the time. You can allow yourself to steer down into that, or you could not, right? Everybody has stuff that pisses them off, right? It's how you deal with it that counts, right? So do nice, happy moods bias our perceptions as much as the, negative moods? Well, yeah. Like we said before about, like I said earlier, about how there's that type of priming where you give people good, the good deed priming, whatever it's called. I can't remember. Anyway, so this begs the question. So what is the most objective and accurate mood you can be in? To perceive things with the least amount of bias. If you could be primed to miss negative things and only see, positive things more than you normally would. And then when you're in a really negative mood, you might not, perceive things accurately either. So at what stage? So you'd kind of think, well, somewhere in the middle. So somewhere with less emotion, right? So there you go. How do you, now, I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Maybe you could be just as inaccurate if you don't have much emotion. I don't think so, though. I think, the whole Spock thing, right? I think there's some validity to that. So we aren't at the mercy of our subjective biases. You think, well, this person's biased that way, they're wired that way. Well, yeah, but we have a thing called neuroplasticity. Our brains are plastic. Even as adults, they used to say, oh, your brain, you can learn stuff when you're a kid, and then when you get old, it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, we've learned that that's not true. You can learn things your entire age. You can learn stuff. It's just your brain might be a little less plastic, but it's still plastic. You can still learn a lot of things. I mean, we never really stop learning, right? Some people refuse to take in new information, but yeah, we could always learn. So what we could do is we could recognize our, if you have any kind of biases, if you're realizing that, I'm making an error in judgment there, that's not right. You could recognize that, you can analyze it, and you can make proper corrections, assuming your goal is to, perceive objective reality as accurately as possible. And you might think, well, this seems pretty, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, this is common sense. Who wouldn't want this? Well, I agree, this is. But when you talk to people and you talk to them about things that they don't, like politics, especially politics or religion or any kind of these belief things, a lot of people they're lazy thinkers. So they like to just grab onto whatever that is, and then I'm going to believe whatever that they tell me to believe, because I don't want to have to worry about that stuff. I want to think about other stuff. So this is what, I'm this type of politics and this type of religion or not, and then that's what I am. I don't want to think about it. Right. And you put your head you live in a little bubble, and a lot of people do that. Like, you talk to people and they live in this false bubble where their head is buried in the sand, and they're no safer from danger. Burying your head in the sand and ignoring danger doesn't protect you from danger. You can hope in vain, that you'll avoid danger by ignoring it. But, nowhere in the history of humanity has anyone been protected from danger simply by ignoring it or pretending it doesn't exist. It's not a prudent plan. So this is, certainly a path to great injury or destruction. It's like running through the woods with your eyes closed and pretending the trees aren't going to hit you. Well, you might be right. The trees aren't going to hit you. You're going to hit the trees. Life is a lot more fun if you open your eyes and you duck and dodge and you deke around the trees as you run, as opposed to running with your eyes closed and running into the fucking trees. But so many people you talk to want to be in their bubbles. They want to bury their head in the sand. They don't want to think about it, right? I get it. They want to live their happy little life, right? Who doesn't? But there's dangers to doing that. And this is the problem. Just because you pretend, there's no danger doesn't mean there isn't danger. So this is, it's not a prudent plan to pretend it doesn't exist or just try to I'm not going to think about it. Well, you can go ahead, go take a run in the woods with your eyes closed. So what does this mean? This means, in order to live in the most enjoyable, I sound like one of these fucking, what's that dude with the big teeth? What's that guy? These self-help idiots. Anyways, but the deal is, everybody, we all want to live an enjoyable life, the most enjoyable life you can live. And what is enjoyable? Well, it's, to be, to have things right, correct, comfortable, right? And a little energy gives a big return on comfort and, a pleasant life. This doesn't mean blind work for the sake of work. It means putting your energy and time into things that, will facilitate a more pleasant life for you. You could do mental exercises, thinking about things, reading, or, like listening to this podcast. This is one of the greatest things you could do for your mind. Of course, there's like physical exercise. If you don't want to be, if you want to have energy, right, you need to, eat well, but you don't need to eat that well. Like, it doesn't mean starving yourself and eating only certain things, You can eat, everything in moderation, right? Same with exercise. It doesn't mean, you need to go to the gym 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, In fact, I think you might have very minimal return for doing that. And then, of course, you got to play, and then, of course, there's the doing. Just doing things that make things better, And it's whatever that is for you, plan and then execute that plan. Of course, there's subjectivity, and better may not be objectively better from all perspectives, but there may not be an objective better. In fact, there shouldn't be. I don't think there is an objective better, because better is subjective. The term better is from, somebody's perspective. There is no objective better. There might be a better, is there a better where everyone agrees this is, this would be better? Well, probably not. I don't think so. No, there's not. Why? Because some people choose to like down simply because other people choose to like up. So there's going to be, and I think this is a good thing. I think it's good to have these people who do that. And I think it's good to have all the varying opinions of what's, what's better and what's not better, so we can, instead of, we can explore all avenues as opposed to being stuck in some collectivist groupthink rut of terror, horror of error, right? Error, terror, and horror, right? You get in this collective groupthink rut where everybody thinks the same. That's one of the most dangerous ways to be. We need to have voices of dissent, voices of opposition, and that means we need to have voices that you disagree with, and that means I disagree with, that everybody, these are very valuable voices. If everybody agrees, they're useless idiots, now it doesn't mean that just because everybody agrees that thing is wrong, but I mean, it's good to have these voices of dissent. And where there aren't voices of dissent, which has happened to humanity every time a new successful religion appears, you get the groupthink, the collective ideology of religion. And today it happens to be not religion. It happens to be a sort of a woke ideology that is spread and exactly the same as a religion, where people will choose to literally ignore reason, and they're actually arguing against reason. And it's all the same tactics that any religion in the past has used. If there are many different betters out there, conflicting views, that will help steer us, closer to the objective framework that is universal truth. You know what I mean? If this person thinks this is right and that person's, if you have a million different people all just sort of disagreeing, and then the truth will sort of filter itself out. But we can't have a branch that just keeps growing and growing and growing. We sort of got to go back to the trunk. I don't know how to make a good analogy for this, but if you think about it, most humans in the right conditions become thinkers. We all become thinkers. Pothead philosophers, right? You always hear about that, and it's true. And those of us who aren't too busy with the tedious parts of life, like finding food and shelter, will at certain times ponder. And this is one of the reasons why manipulators want to keep us, or keep their targets, very busy, because humans reflect and generally will eventually detect bullshit. If you sit back and you're thinking about something, you're like, what? That's not right that happens, right? And if you don't have time to sit back and think about it, then you're not going to notice it. So if you're too busy, that's sort of what they want. And that's one of the things that cult leaders and, manipulators try to do. They try to keep people busy or distracted. Even, illusionists and magicians, they're all the same as cult leaders and scumbags, right? They all want you distracted so you don't have time to think. Grifters, all of them, all the scumbags of the world, they all want you distracted and not thinking about their bullshit. They want you thinking about what they want you to think about, not their bullshit. Not that they're bullshitting you, right? So we're a philosophical species, I think, and given trends, the trends of how our society is going, I think we're on the threshold of some philosophical awakening. If they do have this universal income and AI takes over and there's no jobs for anybody and they don't kill us all off, those who aren't killed off are going to be, have a lot of free time to think. And this is dangerous to manipulators and an establishment that's based on bullshit, right? So the internet with its great bullshit detector has removed a lot of the lower hanging fruit of bullshit, and but the grand master manipulators, they're smart rats, right? They think fast, they utilize all available tools, and they act fast. So the internet is just a tool, and so it's now being utilized heavily by the manipulator establishment at all degrees, from clickbait scams to legacy media, PR damage control campaigns, and politicos of all stripes, right? What do I keep saying, right? A manipulator establishment that's based on the foundation of bullshit, would try to stop people from having the time and resources for contemplation. idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? And all, brainwashing, tropes similar to that, right? On a grand scale, the manipulator establishment will push spectacle, distraction, large sports events for men and royal events and soap opera drama for women, stereotypically speaking. Fake news, emotional injustices, and the like would further, their goal of keeping focused on the wrong things. What can you and I do? What can I do, you ask? Well, we can recognize their tactics and call them out and use all tools necessary to keep control over the government establishment. Keep the people in control, which is difficult today because the 1% billionaire class have the resources to manipulate the government and the establishment to their own greedy ends. How many people become and stay billionaires who don't have greed as their main motivation? Like, there are anomalies, I'm assuming. Like, I don't know much about Elon Musk. I don't know his personal motivations. But he seems to be motivated by a desire to keep humanity alive. Maybe that's a form of greed, right? He wants to try to, keep our species, alive on different planets in case of, some meteorite hitting this planet or whatever, or AI taking over. There are inadvertent benefits to humanity due to the rabid greed of certain individuals, the ones who are so greedy that they become billionaires, and they have that much drive due to greed. They want to just keep destroying their competition, and right, they just want to rule the world, right? So there's benefits to society. If you take a look at Microsoft, it's a crappy operating system with so many seems to be intentional flaws, right? It has benefited humanity due to the increased efficiencies of a paperless world. Would that have happened some other operating system come around? Probably. I think there's sort of a time is right, and if this person didn't do it, somebody else would have come up with a different operating system. There were other operating systems. Of course, Unix, and then, of course, Unix had so many spin-offs. Like we have Linux, right? Torvald, wasn't Linus Torvald or whatever? Is that the guy's name, right? He made Linux. I call it Linux. I don't know if it's Linux or Linux. Anyways, so that's a great operating system, right? So we don't need Gates and his operating system. In fact, we should probably try to get rid of it at this point. But there were inadvertent benefits to our humanity, due to the drive and greed by people like Gates. He's a dropout pirate of Silicon Valley, and now he's telling us about viruses, and pandemics. How is he an expert on that? How does this make him an expert on pandemics, right? Don't go to school if you want to be an expert on pandemics. Just be a ruthless piece of shit with no moral compass, and then apparently you'll be an expert in virology, and CNN and all these other legacy media losers will put you up and cite you as if you're an expert somehow. How? Jesus. You got to wonder, how did these guys succeed? I don't think, the Bill Gates and Elon Musk and these guys, how they succeed. There's not some, mystical consciousness, I don't think, or, angels and whatever, that are steering them or giving them benefits for helping humanity, or, because a lot of these people are evil. Right? They seem it seems to have no difference on their success. So it seems to be more of a broad strokes kind of thing, for objective reality. If you run, you will be faster at running. If you type, you will be faster at typing. If you create a successful business, it's like a long tail, right? You'll be wealthy. And if there's, 10,000 people or 1 million people all trying to start different creative businesses or trying to create businesses, there's bound to be some that are successful and some that are not. And the majority of them won't be. And the ones that are, doesn't mean that they were clairvoyant or had special skills or, some, secret sauce helping them out. It's just more probability. That's the whole point of having, different points of view and different people having different perspectives and different betters, right? With all these different betters, people think, well, I think this would be better if I did it this way. So I'm going to maybe start a business. I'm going to do it that way because I think it's better. And if they're right, they will succeed. And if they're not, they won't, right? There's been history. There's all kinds of businesses that are better ideas, and the businesses don't succeed for, reasons, conflicting management. You have too many chiefs and not enough Indians, right? There's not enough. Everybody wants to be in control or whatever, right? And there's nobody actually doing the business. And so businesses, I think, seem to be run better if it's run, from a single point source, like a dictatorship kind of thing. Doesn't mean, well, yeah, it does mean that it's my way or the highway, right? That's the point of a business. But the problem now is we have these my way or the highway businesses that are controlling. They're bigger than governments, and they're controlling our society. We got the Googles, we got the alphabet or whatever they call it. They own ABC, and they own ABC. They own Google and YouTube and all that stuff, right? And then you got Apples, and you got the Amazons, and you got all these people that are pushing their my way or the highway. Twitter, you got Jack Dorsey, the scumbag, right? The guy is so biased, it's disgusting, right? And I don't know if he sees it as he's sincere and not seeing how biased he is, or I think it might be more sinister than that. I think he knows how biased he is, and he just doesn't give a fuck. Fuck you, my way or the highway. This is my platform. You want to come on my platform? Get on your knees and do what I tell you, right? If not, fuck off, or I'm going to fucking, Anyways. But this is the problem. This is a problem when we have corporations that are that large. And I think that's the whole point of monopoly. Monopoly, the game was a warning, right? We can't have monopolies. We need to have competition. Is fantastic. Competition is what creates, innovation, right? When you get these monopolies, like the Bill Gates type people that try to destroy competition, right? These are the scummiest pieces of shit on the planet. And, here they are lecturing us, right? These are the guys that need their knees chopped off, right? They need their companies broken up. They need, and you say, well, you can't, they're competing against China. They're competing against, they're globalists. They're all over. We could chop them up in, in different nations, and you want to go and whatever, rule Africa or rule, Asia, go nuts, right? That's their problem, But I think, as nations, you need to have restrictions to control these monsters in our nations in order to keep the power from these my way or the highway type psychopaths who are CEOs, right? Typically, I think you need to be a psychopath to be at that level where you just. I think they thrive on destroying their competition. They're like, yes, crush them. You know what I mean? They don't care about all those people losing their jobs, and they could give a fuck, right? In fact, they might even enjoy knowing that these people are losing their jobs. It's almost like the Trudeau government. I think they're getting off and knowing that, those soccer moms, they can't afford gas now. We're gonna jack it up that price of gas and put more taxes on there, screw those little people over. Oh yeah, I think these people are that sick. I think they are that twisted. These fucking psychos that are in government and CEOs, right? They are not. Maybe they're the normal humans, and idiots like me that have some kind of stupid values. It's holding me back. Maybe I'm the one that's flawed. I shouldn't be, maybe I'm supposed to be, I should be more psychopathic. Maybe I've been brainwashed, to give a shit and not want to see other people suffer in agony, not enjoy it like these pieces of shit do, right? So who knows? It's too late now. I'm an old fart, still in my 40s, but getting up there. Anyways, what was I talking about? Went off my ranting. People can argue that there's a greater good, and there is a better. What they think is better is objectively better, even though there is no. I don't think there's an objective better, because it all depends on your perspective, right? You want to put a highway in, is that better? Well, it's not better for the forest that you're bulldozing and the animals that live there, right? So I mean, what's your perspective? Is it the human perspective only? Okay, maybe, right? But maybe we're just a virus. And our contemplations about the universe and quantum physics and all that stuff is just arrogant hubris, being a contemplative species, we come up with these ideas We have these epiphanies. And, if you write stuff down, it seems to, your thoughts, you manifest ideas. When you started writing, you didn't have that complete idea. You start writing things out and you sort of formulate this idea as you're writing. So only after the work of thinking, does our epiphanies manifest. Now, I'm not sure if that's the right definition of the word epiphany. I know there's like a religious one, and I'm thinking of epiphany as like, eureka. Oh, I had an epiphany, an idea, a new, concept popped into my head, right? But it seems to be those don't just appear. It's usually you got a bunch of little ideas that sort of you string together, and then you work on it, and then eventually you come up with a new idea, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And that happens a lot when you write. If you write stuff down, you're like, wow, I didn't realize that when I started writing. This is, it's pretty bizarre, right? It's like taking a shit. You're left with a turd as a reward for all that work, right? So, are we living in a close enough universe? A close enough encounters? Thoughts, concepts, ideas. They tend to reveal themselves end first. It starts at the end, and then it finishes with a big reveal. Like I was just saying, you don't know, right? And then you start writing down, and it sort of unfolds end first. It's like some parallel time dimension, and you're reading it backwards, right? So, it makes you think, does our subconscious have the complete idea? And when you're writing and thinking about it, it sort of appears, and you're just reading it last in, first out? Or is it just a process of thinking, that allows our thoughts to form, like building a model out of clay or creating anything? We always start at nothing and finish, at the completed whole. This makes, you think, well, that makes sense. When you build a house, you start, with a field and you finish with a house. But this is not the same as an idea. Because when you start building a house, you don't start digging a hole and say, "Oh, maybe I'll put a floor here. I'll put a wall there." No, you have the complete idea of what the house is going to look like before you start digging in the ground, right? So the idea is not the same as building stuff. Maybe if you're making a clay sculpture, you pretty much have an idea of what you're going to make before you make it. You're going to make a human sculpture or a horse or, gorilla, whatever. Usually you think what you're going to make before you make it. But that's not what happens with thoughts or concepts that we formulated. They sort of, these little chunks plop out, plop, 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 as fragments that appear and they seem related. But related to what? Like you don't know. You don't even really know, right? And then it's like related to what the previous one was. So it's more like a trip. It's like a dream when you have all these sort of fragments. These random thoughts. They're chunks, and you notice something. Well, this is sort of related to that, and that's sort of related to that. And then at the end, you have this completed thing, this completed concept. And I guess it depends on how creative your mind is, right? And so if you can make a connection between something that's pretty far out. And, so probably that's why more creative people come up with more creative ideas, because they can make connections from this random noise in their head to something that they started with. So you start with A, and then there's a bunch of random noise, and you could sort of jump from A to B. And then, from B, there's a bunch more random noise, and it sort of looks like a C, so you jump to that one, right? And then but if you're not creative and you can't see the connection, well, then you're stuck at A, right? And this is what happens with groupthink. I don't think it's like really creative people. The more creative somebody is, do they see connections that are out of the normal? Well, yeah, I think normal being what everybody else, because then it's not creative. You're just repeating what somebody else said, right? If you're going to, synthesize. If you're going to take in some information and create something new from that information, if you're going to synthesize some new information, right? Come up with a new concept. Right, it is out of the normal. It's because if it wasn't out of the normal, it's just what everybody else does, and then that's, repetition. That's groupthink. If you're going to say what other people say, you're participating in groupthink. Not to say that that's wrong. Repeating what somebody else said is not a wrong thing. I mean, there's a lot of great thinkers, or not even great thinkers, just average Joes on the street come up with a lot of funny things or good ideas. You're like, wow, yeah. Like there's a lot of innovation out there that goes unrecognized. A lot of people who can, slap things together with toothpicks and elastic bands. You're like, wow, that is pretty creative. Nobody showed them how to do it. They came up with this stuff, right? So it is out of the normal. And I think this is one of the fundamental things that separates humans from all other life on this planet, is that we are creative. We can make connections to these crazy things. We can make, these unique things, these creative things out of elastic bands and twigs, right? So then from that step we leap to something else, and that's the here we are, right, with landing going to be landing people on the moon, or Mars, right? We've already landed people on the moon, right? Apparently. Maybe we didn't. Maybe that was just a grand illusion, right? But apparently we have enough technology to fool people into thinking that we landed on the moon. So either way, the point is still valid. So this leads me to sort of understand maybe why, when you read about research, that there's a lot of research by, I don't want to call them the establishment. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but there's whoever's paying for it. Somebody's paying for the research. You could probably find out if you dig deep. I'm not going to bother, but it would be interesting to find out. It's probably China, because China's giving a lot of money to a lot of universities. Anyway, so they're studying groupthink and how to get zombies. They don't, not literal zombies, but people who are part of collectives, to think creatively like an individual would, but still maintain their drone status and be, drones to the master of whatever the narrative is of their collective ideology, right? Which is really twisted. I don't know if I mentioned dreams yet or not, but this it's a lot like dreams. You have the random shit in your memories, and it's all sort of thrown together while you're sleeping, and you're trying to make sense of it. And there's a rational part of your mind that seems to be turned off, well, at least mostly turned off, when you're dreaming. Right? That's why you can have these irrational dreams that don't make sense when you wake up, but while you're asleep, everything seems to make sense because you don't have a rational. Maybe that's what it's like being a woman. I don't know. But there's a rational part of our brain that seems to be turned off when we're sleeping. So I think this probably still happens when we're awake. But our perceptions, from our senses, are drowning out all the weak signal from that, because it's a pretty faint signal, I think. And so your sight, your sound, your hearing, your sense of touch, your sense of smell, your awareness of everything that's going on, like this is drowning out that random noise sort of that happens when you're sleeping. So I'm curious if this is true, if my hypothesis is true, that I think that if you went to an isolation chamber, your senses would be like, your sight, sound, all that stuff, right? And it's a neutral body temperature, whatever the water is they put you in, right? So you would begin to, with everything else turned off, you would begin to feel like you're dreaming, because now you would see that random noise, that part of your brain that keeps, has all these crazy creative random noise generator, whatever it is. You would see it, but you'd be wide awake. I gotta try this. It'd be interesting. I want to try one of those isolation chambers, because I think that probably what would happen if it's true. I could be wrong, but I'm gonna have to try that someday. So pondering and reflection is a vector of attack by the manipulator. They can, both sides. So they can incept ideas into targets, where the target believes they came up with the idea on their own. And this is a powerful tool, and hard for people to believe that they've been duped, unless they know this process can happen, and then they have a chance of realizing that they've been duped before it's too late, possibly. It makes you wonder, what ideas do you think you've had, or do I think I've had, that perhaps may have been incepted by somebody else? Some commercials, hey, it's go for McDonald's or KFC, some junk food, right? Or, maybe something a little more bigger than that, right? Who knows? If it works and it's happening, why would it not happen to me? Why would I not have these ideas that I think I came up with that I didn't? Maybe this whole podcast was been incepted into me by some, go make a podcast and bramble on like an idiot, right? Who knows? I don't know. So are there other dimensional creatures incepting ideas, right? Are we living in a hologram, Would we want to know, or should we want to know if we're living in a hologram? if you found out that you're living in a hologram, that would kind of ruin the ride. And if we're not in a hologram, then it's just a waste of energy to pursue that idea. So it's kind of like, why bother, right? Either ignore it, or, I guess you could examine it if you're curious, and, it might give you some joy to examine, are we living in a hologram? But, I mean, logic would dictate that it's not a priority to find that out either way. But there's nothing wrong with exploring the idea if curiosity is driving, you to find out. I don't know how you would find out. If it's possible to even find out, I don't know. I don't think it is, but I don't think that there are any paths of exploration that should not be pursued by humanity. There might be, but I can't think of one right now. So somebody should probably pursue that. Assuming we are in a hologram, what would that mean? Would your values change? Does this mean that other people are non-player characters, NPCs, like in a game, or are we in a multiplayer game where these other people are actually valid people, right? Who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe you're the only person, right? It gets crazy when you start thinking about that stuff. And if it's a hologram, if it is a hologram, at least we can enjoy how high quality the definition is, from, low light and your water and, the sound of wind in the trees and kumbaya, motherfuckers. Life is simple. See you next podcast.